based on some ideas with Steve Wallace, who's the chief network, or was the chief network architect at Indiana University, and now heads a new laboratory in advanced network management as well. Can you put up here? Thank you. Is that louder? Is that any better? Can people hear me at the back? Is that? That's better. Okay, good. Thank you. This talk is an attempt to do something a little bit different. I haven't tried this before, so I hope it works. It's a combination of an updated version of a talk I gave at a conference in Norway last year on basically how we organised our networking on campus in very general terms, and also how we actually managed that within the university. And I was asked to give this talk at a conference of European rectors and presidents of universities to give us an idea of how a very large American university went about organising information technology to ensure appropriate network access to its faculty, staff and students. But what I've done is I've also got some thoughts on how to deal with some global networking issues as well. I'll sort of try to combine the two themes together in one talk. So this is going to be a little bit difficult to do, because if I try and talk to that, you won't hear me.
Would you like to have the handheld microphone?
No, I'd like to have a lavalier mic. Do you have one of those?
Yeah, the other one you can.
No, I'll try and do it from here, just so I can't. I can't see down there and see there and talk at the same time. I'll try and work from up here. So the principal assumption I'm working from is that one of the most important drivers in science in the 21st century is going to be the networks, and that science and research will become highly network enabled in the 21st century. Science and research is becoming progressively more global, and network-enabled worldwide collaborative communities are rapidly forming a broad range of areas. And I think all of us are seeing this in all our countries all over the world. Science is just becoming more and more international all the time. And quite often this is based around a few expensive, sometimes unique instruments, where a whole global world community is actually using those instruments. And it's also built around vast databases, vast amounts of data distributed geographically, and also networks of sensors of various kinds, whether it be for earthquake research or biological research and so on as well. And the critical message here basically is that science is becoming more global all the time, and the critical glue that links all this together is networks as well. Now, this data is going to be collected by geographically distributed instruments. These are analysed by supercomputers and large computer clusters. It'll be visualised with advanced 3D displays and other kinds of technology, and stored in massive or very large storage systems. And again, this is all stuff that I think you're all familiar with, and all of this is going to be distributed globally. And there's going to be a series of very large experiments in this area. I think people are well aware of the new facilities coming online in CIRIL over the next 3 or 4 years, where data rates people are talking about now starting at gigabits but moving to hundreds of gigabits are going to be required. The LIGO experiment is going to require moving gigabits of data around to be able to move data sets of that size as well. There's the ALMA, the large millimeter array facility as well. Collaborative video is going to rapidly move into the HDTV space, which is going to require minimally 20 megabit per second for collaborative activities there scientifically. The slow digital sky survey will require gigabit per second data transfer rates, and so on. Everybody's got their favourite list of such emerging national or international scientific collaborations, and all of them have the requirements for very large amounts of data transfer as well. And I think the vision here is for this global infrastructure and data to be integrated into grids. And as you know, grids has now become sort of one of the most fashionable movements in international and national science. And grids are really seamless global collaborative environments tailored to the specific needs of individual scientific communities in very generic terms. And again, in very, very general terms, when one looks at grids have as one of their fundamental components high-performance networks, which really are what integrate the grids together. And there are basically, very broadly speaking, three components to global grids. And you can parse this in all sorts of ways, but there's the campus networks, which one can think of as being the last kilometre, the last mile, and there's the national and regional education networks. I'm using NRENs here with a second R, and the NRENs are really what link of course all the campuses and all the scientific instruments together in either some country or some region, and then finally you've got these global connections between the NRENs. And I'm going to argue that of these three components, on a worldwide scale, investment in engineering is only adequate for NRENs. And that the campus networks, as I think many of us know, rarely provide scalable bandwidth to the desktop commensurate with the speed of campus connections to NRENs. That's the first point I'll talk about briefly. And then global connections themselves between the NRENs are major bottlenecks, at least in some parts of the world, I think probably in many parts of the world. In particular, they are very slow compared to the NREN backbone speeds. I think that's another major factor. And to build a true global grid is going to require scalable campus networks that provide ubiquitous high bandwidth connection to every desktop, which are also commensurate with the speed of the campus connections to the NRENs. That's the first point. The second point is going to be that global connectivity between NRENs of comparable speeds to the NREN backbones, which is also stable, persistent, and of production quality like the NRENs themselves. That's going to be the second component of what a true global grid requires. So basically it requires the campus network to be appropriately scalable, and it requires the interconnectivity between the NRENs to be of an appropriate speed. And as I said, this is pretty much the talk I'm going to give. I'm going to briefly skate over NRENs, talking about some of their common characteristics. I'm going to talk about grid-ready campus networks. I'm going to talk in particular about what we're doing at Indiana University, and then I'm going to talk briefly about a global solution to this question of interconnectivity of NRENs. So let me talk pretty briefly about NRENs here, and just to make just one fundamental point I want to make here. When you look at NRENs, and here's a list of the sort of NRENs we're going to be talking about. Let's look at Abilene. It's the one I'm most familiar with. At Indiana University, we run the Network Operations Center for Abilene and had a significant role in the implementation of Abilene in the United States. So Abilene at the moment has got an AC-38 backbone, and segments of that, probably all of it, are going to go to AC-192 within the next year. The gigapops are now some are OC48 connected, and probably the majority of them will become OC48 connected to the Abilene backbone over the next year or so as well. It provides the international transit network facility for various connections coming in globally as well. And it has actually seen a gigabyte per second sustained data rates on a number of experiments as well. And comparable figures to these in terms of the backbone speeds and speeds to gigapops or equivalents and other things have also been seen in CERNET 3, the FedNets in the US, like ESNet. This, of course, is going to be one, as I understand it, is going to be where Joint is going. It's going to be having OC48 going maybe to OC192 in some segments of its backbone as well. APAN, which is more of a collection of, it's more of a federation of networks, doesn't quite have interconnects or backbones or anything like this, but it does have at least some components that have comparable speeds. And certainly the NRENs in the APAN region, which this is the Asia-Pacific Advanced Network, the NRENs themselves in that region, which are primarily national, have got backbone speeds of comparable speeds. And then, for example, CIRIL, which is the Chinese Education and Research Network, is planning for within the next year, in fact some components of that are already operational, to have an OC48 backbone as well. So I have some pretty pictures that basically demonstrate, that make this point. Here's the Abilene network at the moment. This is OC48 backbone here, going to OC192 soon. Connects up now in excess of 185 universities and research institutions across the US. And the various gigapops connect into the core nodes at OC12 going to OC48 connections. And that's also the case with the ESNet network that's run by Quest. It's got core components of it running at OC12, but also some of those are going to OC48 as well. That's this progressive move of the backbone to these higher and higher speeds. CIRIL 3, probably people have heard Bill, so I don't know, talk eloquently as always on what he's doing there, and speeds like that, and beyond that what are operational on that backbone as well. Just a slide, of course, for what you're doing here in Europe with Jean is going to go to speeds of that level as well. The OPAN, as I said, this is more a federation of networks, but there are some interconnections here in various places there, and a lot of connections to the StarTAP. But there are some regional connections only of moderate speed. But within these countries themselves, there are some very high-speed networks either in operation, like in Japan with their IMNet and other networks. But also, for example, CIRIL in China has got a lot of these backbone connections are OC48 backbone connections in China, either in place or going to be implemented in the next couple of years. So that very quick tour over world geography is simply to make the point that OC48 today is pretty much uniformly implemented, roughly speaking, among the backbones of NRENs. Moving to OC192 is the next evolution, and many institutions access the backbone of OC12 or greater, and a few connections, that's just institutions themselves, a few connections of OC48. All this is running native high-speed IPv4, and there's some support for IPv6, but that tends to be at a lower performance as well. They run advanced services of different kinds. I won't dwell on this either. They're typically run as open visible networks, not as commercial services. Multicast is deployed on most backbones, but it's still not in production. But still not as production as unicast. And the interconnect between these networks running multicast is still not very reliable. And QoS, of course, is getting mixed results, still its infancy, and so on as well. And again, it's the transition across NRENs, between NRENs, that's been problematic there. But there are some within regions, there's some interregional connection speeds that range from OC3s to OC12s, and maybe the OC48s in some cases. But so that's the situation with NRENs, and I think the point about NRENs is that by and large they have a lot of visibility in all the relevant parts of the world. There's a significant investment in them one way or the other, either by consortia like Internet2 or through government-funded operations like in Europe and other places as well. Where there are difficulties is in the campus, and let me now talk about the problems with campuses. To actually run grid applications and for campuses to participate in the grids of the future, these are going to require guaranteed multi-megabit bandwidth per second for applications end-to-end. And that is, the speeds must be sustained from the desktop through the various levels of the campus network to the NRENs and then to the application target. So campus networks must be architected to provide stable levels of connectivity to NRENs as their speeds increase. This is the critical point I want to make, and I think this is something you're probably all aware of, but it makes no sense to have a shared 10 megabit per second desktop connection delivered at most about a megabit or maybe less into a 10 gigabit per second NREN. It just makes a mockery of the NREN, and it's one of the reasons NRENs are never going to be filled if that's the best data rate that you can by and large sustain from a campus into your NREN connection. And providing appropriate levels of connectivity to the desktop and scalable campus network architectures to support them is certainly a top priority in strategic planning in at least some US universities, and I think it's becoming more and more important. I don't really know that much about the situation in Europe, but in talking to some of the people who asked me to give this talk, I get the impression that it's not maybe seen as quite as strategic in some European universities as it maybe is more broadly in the US. Certainly a sizable portion of telecommunications budgets can go to this. So at Indiana University we spend about $25 million of my total budget, which is about $100 million a year. About $25 million of that goes to telecommunications, and a good chunk of that is to data telecommunications as well, and I'll say a bit more on that in a minute. There are three levels of campus networks. There's the desktop intra-building connection, the last 100 meters, the inter-building connections, and the backbone. And I think the critical point is that each level must provide progressively more capacity, and the whole architecture must be scalable. And campus networks commonly have two external connections, one into the commercial internet. That must be scalable. Quite often this tends to be the choke point because there's just not enough commodity internet connection from the campus. And then of course it must have adequate connectivity into the regional gigapops as well. And those in a very simple way are the fundamental components of having a good, ready campus architecture. And in particular, a way of doing it is to ensure that you have ubiquitous 10 megabit 10-base-T connection to the desktop, which is going to be adequate for at least VHS quality video distribution in areas such as video conferencing, digital library areas and so on. And enables a gigabyte to be transferred in maybe 15 minutes. And 100 megabit will enable you to transfer that kind of data in a couple of minutes and is suitable for HDTV distribution as long as it's switched to the critical things for this to be switched, and then a gigabit which is viable over Cat5 copper can enable you to start thinking about realistically moving terabytes to your desktop. That will take you a couple of hours, and fibre enables you to move beyond those speeds when that's necessary as well. A couple of critical features. Well, I think the first one is the commodity price Ethernet switches that can support 10 to 100 megabit and moving to gigabit connections are critical for the outer components of the network, and then gigabit wire speed ASIC-based routers provide the core of it. And at our university, what we're doing is we run switched 10 megabit per second connections to all 55,000 machines in the desktop. We could be offering 100 now to everybody, and we will be transitioning to that over the next year. Anybody who wants 100 can get it on request, and we probably have maybe 10% of the overall machines. In fact, are at 100, and probably within the next year to 18 months, the whole university, and this is a big university, will transition to 100 megabit connections to the desktop, and we can provide a gigabit per second connections in selected cases as well. We have an AC12 into Internet 2, and at some point we'll upgrade that, and later support for IP multicast on campus as well, and we're supporting QoS in various ways as well. Now, let me say something about management here, because I know this is, I think, of particular interest in Europe. And I'm sure this is true in Europe too, but in the US, IT is recognised, I think, as being of central importance in higher education. Talk to just about any university president, certainly of the major universities, and they will at least in principles, recognise how important it is. Whether they get it right or not is another matter. They all claim it's fundamental to teaching, learning and research. They certainly claim it's essential to responsible and accountable institutional management. Your information systems have to work. And in the US, IT is progressively being seen more and more, I think this is very important, as a source of institutional competitive advantage. That the quality of your IT infrastructure at your university is something you can market as being a competitive advantage you have over other universities. It's also a major source of expenditure in US universities and fully costed at somewhere between 5 and 10% of an institution's total budget as well. That's fully costed. So what you've seen happen in US universities over the last, I'd say probably 10 years, and it's certainly been accelerated in the last 5 years, is that IT has been elevated to a portfolio of central importance in a university, reporting directly to the President or Chief Academic Officer. I report directly to the President of Indiana University in my position there. And this person tends to be called the Chief Information Officer, or sometimes they have other titles as well. And more often than not, they report to the President, but sometimes to the Chief Academic Officer. Personally, I think this is a mistake, because what you have to do as a CIO is more than just the academic side of computing. There's a whole range of other areas as well. But university CIOs are typically responsible for central IT and the support of distributed IT. So they're responsible directly for central IT, but they provide support for distributed IT, though departments themselves will quite often run their own infrastructure. And this, of course, parallels earlier developments in US business as well. In the US, given the vital importance of IT, universities have developed university-wide IT strategic plans, and they guide an institution's future development and investment in IT. and were also used to leverage considerable additional public and private funding for the university IT infrastructure too. So just to give you an example, to give you an idea of what one can do when one aggregates together all of the IT into one portfolio, our university was founded in 1820. Compared to some of the European universities, very young. There was a $1.9 billion budget, and about 27% is from the state. We have 7 campuses statewide, and our 2 largest are Bloomington and Indianapolis. We have around 100,000 students, over 4,000 faculty, nearly 10,000 staff. This is the number of course selections. They compose courses. We have $1 billion endowment. We're in about the top 15 in terms of endowments in the US. The position I have was created in 96. It reports to our president. I'm responsible for IT on all campuses, just to give you an idea of what a CIA does. My total budget that I have direct control over is about $100 million. I've got 1,200 staff, and then departments, schools and faculties who also have their IT operations as well, probably compose about $50 million what the university spends. And central IT, just very briefly, this is what I'm responsible for: telecommunications, data voice, video, and all of that is both within the campus, within the state, and internationally. It's about 35% overall, if you aggregate the voice as well. Research and academic computing, it's supercomputing, data storage, VR, etc. is another 13%. Teaching and learning technologies, this is all the nitty-gritty stuff for faculty, the user support and education, desktop lifecycle funding, classroom IT, enterprise software licensing, student labs, etc. About 28%. Administrative computing, this is the information systems of the whole university, that's about 24% of my budget. So that gives you an idea of basically what the responsibility is. And I think it's by aggregating all that together in one portfolio that we're able to provide a base level of information technology infrastructure to every member of the university, switch 10-base-T to the desktop, lifecycle funded hardware, and enterprise-wide license agreements with vendors like Microsoft to provide their software free of charge to the people in the university. So just quickly and finally, and I'll move on to the global stuff, one of the goals of the university is to be a leader in the use and applications of IT. All universities like to have that as a goal. I got a responsibility of developing an IT strategic plan to achieve this. It was the first we've ever done. We used a committee system, 200 people to prepare it. We prepared it about 5 months, which is probably a university record for preparing a strategic plan, but it's been extremely important to us because once it was approved by our president and the board of trustees, it had the force of law within the university, and I then had the job of implementing it. It's a 5-year plan. It consists of 10 major recommendations, 68 actions. That's the year. It's on the web. It's been very well thought of. We've had a lot of complimentary comments about that strat plan. It's been widely copied by other universities. University of Illinois have told us that they would like to copy our strategic plan at Illinois as well. We have an implementation plan which costed it, and the full cost of this is about $210 million over 5 years, but $120 million in new funding from the state, and we just got our last state budget, and we got most of what we needed for the next biennium, and we have another $90 million reprogrammed university funding. We're about halfway through this, and we're about halfway through the implementation of this plan, and we're pretty much on schedule for the implementation of it as well. So very briefly, that gives you an idea of the scale of the kind of operation that we've put in place to implement an IT infrastructure that we think makes us highly competitive, both in research and in teaching and learning, and in both the recruitment and the retention of good faculty and good students, which is a pretty fundamental thing in any university as well. Now, to talk about the plan is something I have an hour-long presentation on. That's not the topic of today, but there's a lot of interesting information that you can find on the web if you're interested in what we're doing. Every year we publish an update on what we've achieved against the plan in terms of its implementation. You'll find that on the web as well if you're interested. So now let me switch from what I think is one problem, which is getting things right at the campus level. I think, as I said, by and large things are right at the inland level. Let me talk now about getting things right at the global level. So I'm kind of moving from the alpha to the omega of the problem as well. So just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, global network-enabled collaborative goods require true high-speed global research and education networks that is a production quality, that is, it's managed as a production service, it's redundant, it's stable, it's secure. It has to be persistent, that is, it's based on a long-term agreement with carriers and others. And this is a major problem at the moment with a lot of the global connections. They're not persistent in that sense. Provides a uniform form of connection globally through global network access points. This is just a name, but it's an idea of how one can connect into this infrastructure. It provides interconnect speeds comparable to in-ring backbone speeds, and these would be SE48, maybe moving to SE182, and it scales to a terabit per second data rate during this decade. That will be a goal for a global network. And what my motivation here is that I think that what we are seeing internationally is a lot of excellent enterprises being carried out by individual states or MRINs connecting up to other MRINs, but no model for a true global solution, a true global high-performance network has yet emerged. And given my premise that I started this talk with, that science is becoming progressively more global and people are talking about building these highly elaborate grids, the fundamental thing on which they're going to be built still really hasn't been put in place, which is a true global network, as opposed to doing it on a case-by-case, piecemeal, ad hoc basis. So, again, just to reiterate, international connections are very slow compared to inland backbone speeds. By and large, there are some exceptions to this. Long-term funding is uncertain. In the US, the major program that funds these connections finishes in about 2 years, and at the moment there is no successor program to that program in the United States. We're hoping there will be, but at the moment there isn't. The global connection network is not well coordinated, as I think you all know. It is overly reliant on transit through the US infrastructure. Frequently connections are via ATM or IP clouds, which makes the management of advanced services difficult, like I was talking about before, multicast and so on. There's poor coordination of advanced service deployment and extreme difficulty in ensuring reasonable end-to-end performance across this global infrastructure, which is going to be a fundamental of building grids. Now, this is only some of the connections I know into Europe, and there's probably another half again, as many as that. And this is a little slightly out of date because they change every day, it seems to me, as well. But there's at the moment, I've heard it estimated that there's probably a total of maybe 3 gigabits between Europe and the US, made up of a series of individual connections of varying speeds as well. But even though some of these are a significant speed compared to the backbone of Abilene or the projected backbone of Jump, they're still reasonably slow compared to those backbone speeds, and those backbone speeds are increasing faster than I think it's possible to scale up these interconnects between them. The situation is much worse in the Asia Pacific. The best we have at the moment into Japan is about 100 megabits, and the Chinese connection is only 10, and then there's some other connections which are basically T3s or E3s as you call them here as well. There's of course a good connection to CIRIL and a slower speed connection into Mexico, and this isn't in operation yet, and this is at the moment only a T3 connection into the whole South American infrastructure as well. Now, let me just jump over that because that's not that important. Now, one thing I wanted to say is that we have a lot of experience with this at RU, in that we run the Global Network Operations Centre here, and that's the Ufuk, which will be in your slides. And basically we run the high-performance connections to the Asia Pacific, which is Transpac, Eurolink, which are the NSF-funded connections, MIANET, the connection to Russia, the AMPATH connections to the UPSOON, which are the connections to South America, and then we also run the NOC for the StarTAP, and of course we run Abilene. So we basically run this as one joint NOC for all these connections at Indiana University. Now, here's a suggestion as to how to provide a global terabit research network. This would be a single global backbone interconnecting these GNAPs that provide peering within a country or region. The global backbone speeds would be comparable to those at the MREDs. That is, the backbone speed would be, say AC192 next year. Now, maybe that's too conservative. Maybe it needs to be beyond that. But this is a first attempt to try to provide a generic global solution. A critical thing, I think, is it will be based on stable carrier infrastructure. I think more and more, I totally agree with Bill saying now we're going to see, and we ourselves are building fibre infrastructure in our state. But building fibre across longer haul spaces is harder, and building it across the oceans is harder still at this time anyway. Such a network should be persistent, that is based on long-term, at least 5, preferably 10-year agreements with carriers, vendor routers, router vendors and optical transmission equipment vendors and so on, and the various kinds of people you're going to need to provide this equipment. And here very much the model I have is the Abilene model. It's the one I'm most familiar with. I know there are other ones in Europe, but it's the one I'm familiar with. And the model there is that Quest provides the fibre, Nortel provides the optical transmission equipment, and Cisco provides the routers. The long-term agreements have relatively long-term agreements, and it has provided a very stable, extremely reliable, I think very, very high-quality infrastructure in the US for higher education. It should be scalable. That is, that one might want to, for example, move to SC768 by 2004. Maybe that's too conservative too. Maybe multiple wavelengths running striped SC768s or maybe some other technology by 2005, and moving to terabit second transmission by 2006. Something like that. But you want to aggressively scale this up over the period of it. And these GNAPs would connect at OC48 to start with, and these would scale up to backbone speeds as well. You've got a production service managed 24/7 by 365 through some kind of global network operations center. And then this would enable you to coordinate global advanced service deployment as well of those kinds of capabilities. Here's just to finish the talk. Here's to show how easy this would be to do. Here's a little series of builds that show how we could do this. This represents basically either NREDs or national networks in Asia, the Americas, and Europe. And the situation at the moment, I would claim, is somewhat ad hoc like this. You've got bilateral connections between NREDs in one continent or one geographical area and another. Sometimes you've got some multilateral interconnects and so on, but of course none of this is coordinated, and it's ad hoc. It's unstable, and the funding is different, say here than it is in Europe. Short term here, it's more ad hoc here. I think it's probably more stable and better organised, the funding in Europe. In Asia, I think it's worse still, in that Asia seems to be obsessed with connecting into the US, and the thing they do least of is interconnecting within Asia itself. Some of their high-performance connections actually run via the US and back to some of those countries, which strikes me as ridiculous. But that's sort of the situation at the moment. So the proposal is, if one were to establish these GNAPs, which in many places something like this exists already, the model being that the GNAP is like a gigapop or a core node, probably more like a gigapop in the Abilene sense, in the Internet 2 sense, then one could interconnect these over a carrier fabric which provides a uniform backbone internationally. Now, there's probably half a dozen carriers. I could name some of them: Global Crossing, Sprint, Telegraph, AT&T, and some others who could provide, who've got international fibre networks, who could provide a global fibre infrastructure like this to interconnect these GNAPs. One of the virtues of this is, and this might be an example of how you would do it, one of the virtues of this is that it would get rid of differentiated pricings, it would get rid of interregional squabbling over the US not paying its share or paying too much, or whatever your particular view is about this, in that one could charge a common price for connections into this common fabric here. So if Abilene wants to have 5 connections, it would pay the same for each of those connections into it. If an NRED in Europe wanted to have a connection, it would pay the same price. This could be $500,000, $250,000, $1 million, depending on how the economics of it worked out. But you would get a stable connection into this global infrastructure, which would connect you into all these other networks. And a critical thing here is that it solves the problem logically of interconnecting Europe with Asia via this fabric, and of course the Americas with Asia and the Americas with Europe. And it also solves the problem of connecting Asia within itself north-south, because this would work physically over fibre in that region, or logically it would look like that. That's just a proposal. A number of us are at the moment actively discussing this proposal in the United States, and we've been discussing it with some of our European and Asian colleagues, to see whether we can reach some kind of consensus on pushing for a global solution to inland interconnectivity to build a true global research network like this over the next couple of years, and see where the difficulties are with this kind of model and try and push it. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. But just to sort of summarise where I got to, I talked about three things: inlands, which I think by and large, I know everybody has their problems, but by and large I think inland's in reasonable shape. I spoke briefly about campus networks, how one can describe a scalable campus network, and in particular how universities in the United States actually manage so that they can implement these scalable networks, those who have actually done this, and how people are working towards building these scalable networks. And finally I moved to the other extreme and looked at the problem about how to interconnect the inlands in a rational way that addresses both political problems and technical and scientific problems on a global scale. That's what I've got to say, and thank you very much.
I think we have time to take a few questions, if there are any. Okay, please.
You quoted that your local land is QoS enabled, and you quoted that you have different ways of providing QoS. I'd like to have more details on that.
I can give you some details, but if you want to get the fine detail, if you want to send, I can give the email address. Send Steve Wallace the email. He'll give you gigabytes of details on how it's done. Steve is the architect of the campus network, and he can give you.
That implies that you are expecting from the global networks QoS enabled networks.
Right.
Which kind? I mean, what do you expect from these global networks?
That's something that will emerge from the community as to what the appropriate standards are there. I mean, that could be one of a dozen different mechanisms. It could be a combination of them. I'm more interested in what a sort of a logical way or a rational way of trying to architect a global network would look like. I think a whole lot of these things really get determined in the marketplace of good ideas, and although that doesn't always happen, but by and large that's what they'll emerge.
Okay, any other question? Okay, I think, thank you. We can go ahead with the second presentation by Alexandre Simon.
I try. Do you hear me? Okay. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So, I'm from Simon from the CIRIL in France. First, before starting my presentation, I would like to, I hope you will excuse me for this presentation. It's the first time I do this in English, so I hope my English will be as clear as possible. So I'm going to present you the Internet access for academic networks in Lorraine by the infrastructure and services. So my presentation will follow this content. First, is it possible to cut this one? Okay. My presentation will follow this content. I will start with a brief introduction to replace this presentation in the context of Internet access in France. After this, I will take the example of Stanet, which is a metropolitan network, and I deal with infrastructure, services, and exploitation and operating team. After this, we will see an extension of a metropolitan network, which is Lorraine, and I will finish by a conclusion. So, internet access for academic networks in France is based on hierarchical levels. A user who wants to access to the internet has to go through different levels. So, a user on the StarNet, which is the metropolitan network, is connected to his local network, after this to his metropolitan network, after this to his regional network, which is Lorraine, and finally the national network, Renater, is the last door to the internet. So you can understand that Renater federates all the region of France, and a region like Lorraine federates its man and sites. So to give some landmarks I can present this network in some key points. So Renater, which is the National Telecommunication Network for Technology, Education and Research, can be compared to an internet service provider for the university in France. It differs from a commercial ISP because it cannot have commercial use, and services must be related to technology, education and research. Renater interconnects 27 regions of France together and to the internet through 4 points, including startup, 10155 and 2 transatlantic links. Lorraine, in English, the high bandwidth telecommunication network of Lorraine for research and academic computer application, can be also compared to an internet service provider for the university in Lorraine, because it is connected to Renater for the interconnection to the internet. It is governed by the same rules concerning the use and the access. So Renater interconnects 2 MAN, StarNet and ARPANET, and 32 smaller peripheral points together and to the internet through Renater. Lorraine is composed of an high bandwidth ATM backbone for the most important point of the region, and classical link lines are used for less important points. And the last one, StarNet, for Stanislas network, is the metropolitan academic network of Nancy, which is a town of the region. It interconnects 19 establishments spread over 45 sites together to the regional network and to the internet through the regional network Lorraine. It is we say it is a private large campus network built around a gigabit Ethernet backbone developed by an ATM backbone. So, the StarNet infrastructure. StarNet is known as the private large campus network. We use the term private to emphasize the fact that this network is financed and operated by and for the University of Nancy. Moreover, the optical fiber of the physical infrastructure are owned by the university. That's why we say it's private. We can also say it is a large campus network because it has about 120 kilometers of optical fiber cables in the street of the city. It interconnects 19 establishments spread over 45 sites. We have 4 main routers and 165 switches, 213 Class C network and about 250 VLAN declared on the backbone. And finally, StarNet serves a community of about 50,000 users, including students, faculties, researchers, and so on. So this figure illustrates the physical infrastructure of Stalnet. Initially, 4 converging points and 39 peripheral points were defined. The four converging points, which are the CIRIL, Campus des Sciences, Pôle Lorraine Gestion, and Présidence UHP, constitute a square of converging points connecting by optical fiber cables of 24 single mode fibers, whereas peripheral points are served by optical fiber cables from 12 to 84 single mode fibers. There are also multi-mode fibers, but they don't appear on this figure. What is important to remember on this figure is the strategic location of the converging and the peripheral points in order to connect the sites. And what is important to remember is the number of 120 kilometers of optical fiber. So Stalnet is a double backbone gigabit Ethernet and ATM. The backbone is powered by Cisco system devices, and it uses the both technology. So for the gigabit Ethernet technology, four ionical gigabit Ethernet switches router from Cisco Catalyst 6000 family. They provide bandwidth from 100 megabits to 1 gigabit. It uses VLAN technology and central routing, and transport mainly IPv4 traffic. For the ATM technology, we have 4 ATM switches with OC3 interfaces, providing maximum bandwidth up to 155 megabits. It allows the configuration of dedicated virtual channel and path, providing dedicated links with reserve resources and QoS capabilities. And it transports mainly specific traffic like IP over ATM, IPv6 telephonic traffic, and so on. So there is the topology of Stalnet. So you can see the gigabit backbone and all the sites connected to the backbone. What is important on this figure is that we have a redundancy backbone connected with bandwidth up to. Okay, thanks. This backbone is connected with bandwidth up to 1 gigabit, and each site is connected with bandwidth from 100 megabits to 1 gigabit. And we have the interconnection to Renater, the regional network, which is connected to Renater, the national network. That's okay. The extensibility and flexibility of the infrastructure can be easily demonstrated by 2 examples. The first one is when a client wants to be connected to Stalnet. So we have to construct a new fiber path, which can be easily done because of the strategic location of converging points. We have to deploy a new switches and a new switch, and to create a new VLAN. And to finish, we have to activate central routing of this new VLAN on the backbone. The second example is when an existing client wants to migrate or to have an extension to another site. So, two steps. We have to do an optional deployment of a new switch, and finally to transport the VLAN with the VLAN technology to this new site. So now let's deal with Starnet services. So, Starnet is a transport network, but also a service network. There are two main domains of services: network services and system services. For network services, Starnet provides IPv4 and IPv6 connectivity within the MAN and to the Internet. It has a good extensibility and scalability of LAN with the use of VLAN technology. It provides security interVLAN with Cisco access control list and central routing, and it supports specific traffic from Renater like IPv6, multicast, and so on. The first system services is DNS, because we manage all the domain of Starnet except for a few which are delegated to sites which have enough resources to manage themselves their domain. We also do email box management and web hosting for certain sites which don't have the capabilities to manage their own servers. And to reduce the internet access bandwidth and to provide safe information, we manage central news service. So, how Starnet is explored and the operating team. So, all the infrastructure and services that I have present are managed by a team of 5 network engineers and 3 system engineers. This team is located in the CIRIL, which means Centre Interuniversitaire des Ressources Informatiques de Lorraine in French. It is an inter-university network computing resource server. In fact, my team and its resources are shared by the 4 universities of Lorraine, of the region Lorraine. The CIRIL has some specific mission to provide network and system services, to guarantee the connectivity and the good health of the network and the system, and to propose network and system evolution with technological survey, with development, testing, and project, and so on. To provide its mission, the CIRIL uses several tools. First, to configure device, we use the famous and well-known command telnet, but we have dedicated scripts, and we have developed several tools for web-based administration. IP and level 2 supervision are done with tools like NetUp, Traceroute, and dedicated tool using SNMP protocol. Security configuration is done with ACL and dedicated scripts. ACL and syslog parsing are used to do some security supervision to see the accesses violation and so on. And to provide traffic metrology and statistics, we use NetNet, which means network metrology. It is a tool developed by the CIRIL, and a tool which is used in other region of France. So, I finished with Starnet. Now let's have a look to our regional network. So Lothair is, I present in French, Lothair is a van for man and site. Why? Because Lothair is a high bandwidth wide area network, like a regional network. It provides network transport for 2 mans and 32 peripheral points. It is financed and operated by and for the University of Lorraine, and in fact the project is quite similar to Stannet, except for the optical fiber of the ATM backbone, which are leased from France Telecom, which is the public telecommunication operator of France. So the projects are quite the same, except for one is a MAN, and the other is a regional network. And of course, Lothair is entirely operated by the CIRIL and its team of network and system engineers. So, Lothair is a regional network, okay, but we can say that it has a user dimension, because user can be directly connected to the regional network. It provides the same functionality as a man, and it is operated like a man. So this is the figure of Lothair and its topology. You can see the ATM backbone connecting the 6 most important points of Lorraine, which are called MAP for Metropolitan Access Point. So this backbone is leased from France Telecom and provide bandwidth up to today 100 megabits. And for peripheral sites where users are, classical leased lines are used and provide bandwidth up to 2 megabits. And you can see on the regional network the 2 metropolitan network, which is Stannet and OpenNet for the town of Metz. And as I say, the regional network is connected to Renater, which is the national network. So what is important to remember on this figure is that we have 2 metropolitan networks, peripheral sites, and the minimum bandwidth is 2 megabytes. Bits, 2 megabits. Okay, so I can conclude. Stannet and Lothair are networks with a user dimension. This user dimension is obvious for a man like Stannet, but about our regional network, this dimension is now recognized for Lothair. Today we cannot divide network and user life, because users have an effect on networks, and users have requests for their needs, and network exploitation must take care of this request of users. And our metropolitan and regional experience leads us to say that an homogeneous operation of the network guarantees this interaction between network and users, and the long and successful life of the network. Okay, so thank you for your attention.
Any questions? Okay, that's one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lorraine is of course only one of the regions in France.
Yes.
Could you say something, if you look at Stanet and Lothaire, how does that compare to the other regions? Are all regions in France like this, or are you more advanced than the other regions? What is the general picture?
Yeah. In fact, we are more advanced in France, except for Paris, which has a big metropolitan network. But yes, bigger. But what is important for our region and our metropolitan network is the project. The technology doesn't matter. It's a project. In France, Stanet is the unique metropolitan network which is private infrastructure, private physical infrastructure. All the other metropolitan networks in France don't have this private infrastructure. And in fact, what is important in Lorraine is that my chef get all the university and make the university to work together, and that's why that really the I can find my word.
Maybe you can say in French. Okay.
It's the most important for the project, the fact that we could work together on the university.
I see. Any other questions? I have one little one. Do you have any DSL or ADSL or variation of DSL connections?
No. We just have I don't know, RTC, traffic telephonic, but for specific. Okay.
Our third presentation is from Laura Stappershoef. It's the local access on Delft.
No, I do this one. You have Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I think after the first presentation of this afternoon, which was a very global presentation, and the second presentation was more regional, we now have a very local presentation, in a very small scale, only of one city and one university. I'll talk about connecting staff and students to the network of the Delft University of Technology. And I first shall give a brief historical view how this was done, and I shall go into detail about some of the latest developments on this subject. First, a small introduction of the Delft University of Technology. It's a university of 7 faculties and 16 courses, most of them of technical science nature. We have about 30,000 students and 4,000 staff. We have first 4 service departments, among them the Department for Technical Support, who also do the computer and telecom support, and where I'm employed with. Then a small introduction of the city of Delft. City of Delft is a medieval town between Rotterdam and The Hague, about 90,000 inhabitants, and it's a historical center, especially for the royal family. One of them was murdered there, all of them are buried there, except one who was King of England. So it was also a cultural and a political center in the 16th and 17th century. Well, I begin with the 17th century on the first view on Delft, made by Johannes Vermeer, a famous painter. To go forward to the 20th century, we made a kind of development in art from realism to a little bit cubism, and ended in 1988, and now we again have a view on Delft, now from above, and I switched it off. He switched it off. Here, Mr. Vermeer was standing when he painted that painting, and what you see here is a map of Delft. This river is from to the lake there and to Rotterdam there. This is the campus area of the Delft University of Technology. These squares with number in it are student called dormitories, housing. The number means the amount of students who live there. And in this the little rounds are telephone connection, because the first connection to a staff of students were telephone connections. First time in 1988, only staff, only the happy few, with a dial-back system, so they didn't have to pay it. We went over to 1992. Then we have a call-in and call-back facilities for telephone connection. Also students had some connections with the telephone where they had to feel. But that's largely overall. Right, a summary of the dial-in and dial-back facilities. As I said, they began at 1988 and then they were located on a telephone exchange, on a private university telephone exchange. 1993, we had a gateway on our network, and we had possible TOTS and ISDN connections. And in 1998 we took the call-in facilities from a national provider, so students all over the Netherlands could call in with the same amount of cost. Our current situation is 12,500 connection hours per week. All students have a student account. When they enter a university, they get an email at their address, and first email they get is the email about their Inval account, and they also have 4,000 staff accounts. That's all I'm going to say about individual call-in and call-back facilities. 1995, and now I'm getting to, especially to the student side. A lot of students had desktops at home. They made little networks, because a lot of students live in small or greater communities. You've seen on the map the large student complexes, but there are also communities from 4 till say 40 students who live together in some way or another. So we had a lot of network, but how to connect these to the network of the university. Well, in 1995 we provided these students with IDSM routers, and they connected their network with these routers, and it was at that time it was a really nice facility. We saw these networks as well on the small student location, the small square, as the big ones. So here there were, it's a very big complex, there were 2 groups with a router. Here there were one group with more than 50 students on one network on these ISDN routers. The ISDN routers were free for students. They had them in loan. They had to pay themselves the connection cost, so the units they pay on the telephone bill. They made the local network infrastructure themselves. They all had IP addresses from the University of Delft, so they have university IP addresses, all of them. They get 8, 16 or 32 or 64 addresses. There was contact in every house, so there was one person or sometimes 2 persons who were cared for the communications between the university and the users, by, for example, when there were security problems or things like that. And besides that, they had a great knowledge and experience pool, so they helped each other on new locations and made new features for existing locations. Now we are in 1979, and we have seen that big networks on the big housing complexes, and we tried to make some network possibilities on the total of the complex. So we communicated with the housing agency, and we made the first fiber connections to housing outside of the campus in Delft. And the first one was this one, and later we also had this one, and later also these houses on the campus, but that's easy because you can put the fiber in yourself. Fiber to these houses was very difficult, because you can ask a telecom provider to put that fiber there, but it was not, it was far too expensive. So we had a service from the national telecom provider KPN for 10 megabits. It was quite expensive, but okay. And we made that first on that first location, and later also other locations. As I said, we had to do that in cooperation with the housing agency, because they had to make the building with cables and with our wall outlets and things like this, and also the network infrastructure. But we put in the nodes and the patching and things like that, and we are for each wall outlet, each room gave an IP address, and also there was what we call in Holland a network master. That's also a person who knows about the network and who knows us and can communicate between the students and between us about problems with the network. They also give a lot of support on the local inhabitants of the complex. The cost for the students were 12 to 15 guilders per month, and there was also a student organization called Online Internet, only for short, who give support to individual students, also to support to the network master, and they made a lot of web pages to support these students. That's the homepage of that student organization, and you see here the link to the support and a lot of pages about possibilities on these complexes. This is one of the latest complexes that's on the campus, so they're not all so beautiful. Well, in the 99, all the purple houses are on the 10-bit connection service, and some IDSM routers still are operable. But that was the big problem, because these ISDN connections was max 128K, and because it was very expensive if you did a lot of traffic. So we looked for another solution of that problem, and that solution was ADSL. And ADSL is a service we love a lot and hate a lot. Love because it is very nice when it works and when it's available, and it's not nice when it's not available. I'll come to that. We made a deal with a telecom provider so that we can deliver to our staff two types, 265 and 512 kilobit. For students also, for individual students, but also we made available for groups half, 1 and 2 and 4 megabit per second downstream. This is the situation. It was on May 6th. And what you see is, in the last column, is the realized connections, and after the rented connections up to now, and you see a very big difference between them. And that's a problem, because for ADSL a telecom provider has to be in the telephone exchange, of the automatic branch exchange, from the national provider KPN, who have to give access to these other providers, and I don't think they really want to. So they find every way to give some excuse to say no, it's not this month, not the month after, and so forth. So they have a lot of excuses not to let these providers into their exchanges, and we think it's a problem because of the monopoly position of the telecom provider for so long a time, and now they're privatized, and it's quite difficult to to get it right. We had earlier this problem in a lecture about Turkey, I think. But when it's running, it's really nice, and the capacity is fantastic. The people are very enthusiastic, but the people who are waiting are not so. But I hope at the end of this year it will be all beautiful. The latest developments on fiber. In Holland there is a big program, national program called Gigaport, to upgrading network facilities within the university, but also in the economic environment. And they have made some projects available, and one of these projects was fiber to the dormitory, and that requires fiber connections to student locations, and with a capacity of 2 megabit per person, when 20% of all persons are connected. We will connect 2,600 students on 5 locations. But also need to be done is to separate the traffic between the students of our university and other occupants of these complexes. And furthermore, there needs to be an authorization by a smart card. This project has started in January of this year, and we do it for 3 complexes who already have a 10 megabit fiber now, and 2 new complexes. One of the specialties is the traffic routing. On these dormitories there are mostly students of the University of Technology, but also other people. Some don't study at all, and some they study at an other institute of higher education. And depending on the person who is on the outlet, you have to route the traffic to or the university or the other institute of higher education or to a commercial provider. The last week we have a long debate on how to do that, and there were 4 options we have considered, and that was the option by the switching routers, and you can think of VMPS with Cisco switches, but that's a non-proprietary solution. And there's also the 802.1x. I hope somebody finds a new name for that, which is a standard solution, but it's not still in developing, and there are no clients available now, so we couldn't choose that solution. Other solutions are tunneling when they go outside, and you can think about VPN tunneling or PPP over Ethernet. The problem with VPN tunneling was that the server you need for such a lot of traffic is really very expensive. So, well, the decision has not made, but I think it will be PPP over Ethernet, the way we route the traffic. And later this year, beginning of next year, we must have solutions for the authorization and authentication. First we'll use software authorization by login, username and password, and later we will make the available smart card students and the Dutch University, Delft University, get a smart card when they enter the university. Well, something about costs. Don't economize on network equipment. It's easy to think, oh, we have old switch, we put them in the dormitory, it's cheap. But then we get a lot of different type of equipment, and that's not really good manageable. And when you want to manage it with not a lot of people, it's better to make good equipment and all the same than a little bit cheaper, but a lot of things. And furthermore, make simple and clear arrangements. You can make a very difficult and complicated system to administrate and to bill students and things like that. And this also gives a lot of human resources, and this costs a lot. So we've chosen for a really easy administration, and the cost the students pay, they pay an increase of their rent, so it's one billing system for rent and these facilities. So a lot is to save when you make a good billing arrangement and good administrative arrangements. And last but not least, use students a lot. I know it's not so difficult with a technical university, but it's quite nice to have the first line support for all students by the students themselves. If you have set up a help desk for 4,000 students, you're not very happy with one or two persons. And also for the local network management, you can use the students. Well, at the end of this year, we have not only the dormitories who already have 10 megabits now, but also new. This one is just 1st of May new, and also this one will in the second half of this year. And this one will be in June. So then we have all the student complexes above say 100 on fiber, and we hope to have all the other smaller houses on ADSL, and we will be very happy then for our student facilities. That's it.